Hey, JD here. Welcome to the Mead House. You know, over the past several years, we've brought you over 150 episodes of mead making education, information, and entertainment. More than 100 guests have stopped by the Mead House, professional mead makers, medal-winning home mead makers, competition organizers, experts on yeast and honey, and brewers just like you and me have all visited to share their knowledge. Hey, the Mead House is produced for home mead makers and brewers looking for a bit of inspiration and information from the many guests and discussions we have here at the house. You can help support the Mead House by joining the Mead House Keyholder Club on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com and search for the Mead House. There's also a link in the show notes. For as little as $2 a month, you can become a keyholder. We've teamed up with some great companies to provide thank you gifts for your support. So get on over to Patreon, join the Mead House Keyholder Club, and get your own set of keys to the Mead House. You can listen to the Mead House podcast with your favorite player, and be sure to rate us 5 stars on iTunes or your favorite listening venue. The Mead House, mead making entertainment you just don't want to miss. Hey, welcome to the Mead House, and thanks for listening to episode number 185. I was just shoveling snow out in the driveway when Jeff and Ryan showed up. I'm JD Webb, and I'll probably have to vacuum the living room after they leave. Hey, the Mead House podcast, we are absolutely everywhere. iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Spotify. I'm not going to go through the whole list here. Look it up on the front page of the website, themeadhouse.com. There's a ton of them listed there. Hell, even Amazon Music. Have Alexa play our podcast for you. Again, at the front page of the website, meadhouse.com. In this episode, we're going to devote this segment, the first segment, to something other than a bragging. I know, has JD and the boys gone off the deep end, jumped out without a parachute, fell off and couldn't get back up? Nah. How about an all-fruit mead? Which fruit and why? Which fruit you wouldn't? And which ones would you blend? So we'll talk about that in the first segment. And then, I apologize because I put the whole show notes and everything together and kind of lead the thing along the way here. Lead the train down the track, or lead the horses and the wagon down the dirt road, or however you want to call it. We had a guest last week. It was just phenomenal. So we went a little bit long on that segment. And then I guess we got into a discussion about a few other things in segment 2 that went kind of long. Anyway, the promise that I made about having a double header with Social Club just kind of fell apart. But we did manage to get a couple of them in. Michael Labonte was glad to get him covered. He's a good avid listener of the show. So today, in this episode, I promise we're going to do a massive amount of Social Club, a doubleheader as promised a couple of weeks ago. So we've got that to look forward to, all that and more here at the Mead House. But first, hey, thanks to all the key holders, Mead House key holders, that is, to help keep the Mead House podcast free. Hey, you can become a Mead House key holder. It's really simple. Help support the show and keep podcasts free just for as little as $2 a month. That's all it takes. We've got some great thank you gifts to send out to you, plus a listing of key holder only content over at patreon.com. Just search for the Mead House, or just click on the link in the show notes. I also think there's a link on the front page of the website, meadhouse.com. Hey, what are we drinking tonight? Double fisting it, guys. In my first glass, this is bourbon night, bourbon Tuesday, I guess. And I'm drinking a pretty tasty mead, one that I really like. It's called Bell Mead. Now, this is one of the oldest bourbons to come out of Tennessee. Now, we're talking early 1800s, somewhere around 1838, I believe I read somewhere. And was one of the largest distilleries in Tennessee all the way up to 1909 Prohibition, where things just kind of fell apart and bourbon making took to the hills. Bell Mead, it's about 90%, 90.4% Now, the curious thing, you've got to taste this bourbon to understand what I'm going to tell you, okay? Because it's going to surprise you, all right? This is sweet up front. You get lots of that toasted caramel and brown sugars, vanillas. There's a sweetness that goes on, it kind of lingers into the mid palate a little bit. And then you finish off with these spices. Now, those spices, this mash bill is 30% rye. Okay, that's almost unheard of in a mash bill for a bourbon. So all that spiciness and everything that you get on the pretty much on the back end of the mid palate and finish comes from that rye. It's a nice cinnamony type of spice. You get citrus notes up front along with the vanillas and the caramels. It's really good. Sweetness right on the tip of the tongue. A little bit of maple syrup if you dig deep. There's some floral notes as well in there. But this is a bourbon. This is a sipper. This is again one you want to sit in that big overstuffed chair with a good book, with a couple of ounces, and just sit and just quietly sip this. As you thumb through a good book. So that's what I'm doing in the first glass. In the second glass, Ryan, um, I, actually like Jeff, digging around in the refrigerator. Okay, I see this, and I got a funny feeling, Ryan. I know where this one came from. But I'm digging around in there and I see this Mountain Dew bottle topper, okay, on this 12-ounce brown bottle. And I'm thinking, what the hell is that? And so I pulled it out, and it says it's on a green piece of tape, and it says avocado and espresso, 2019. So the Mountain Dew bottle topper, Ryan, is that Kevin's?
That is Kevin. That's Kevin's signature when he's not singing the competitions, is to throw that bottle cap on there.
I must have come home with this after the first Iron B, and it's been sitting in the refrigerator ever since. And it's quite nice, actually, even after what almost a couple of years sitting in the refrigerator. I mean, it was nicely sealed. I like Ryan's idea about putting everything in these 12-ounce bottles and, just using a bottle capper and sealing them up. Um, Lots of coffee notes for sure. There's a little tiny bit of bitterness that kind of is offset by the sweetness that you get from the avocado. The avocado also has kind of a bitter component to it, but it's a really nice bitterness. It really blends in quite nicely, and you get those deep, almost toffee-like, like a cooked toffee or a dark caramel note from that avocado honey. It's rather rich, but it's tasty. This stuff is really good. Mm. Wow. I don't know. I don't know how he incorporated the espresso. Whether he used an espresso powder in the ferment or the secondary or whatever. But Kevin, if you're listening, I don't remember if I had this at the Iron B at the after party, um, but this stuff is really good. So that's what I'm doing tonight, guys. Jeff, what's in your glass tonight?
It's funny you mentioned the talk of cleaning out the fridge, because that's exactly what I'm doing tonight. I was in the mood for something a little light, and we've been going through some older bottles. I found a whole stash of. Have you guys seen the Island Mist product? It's
Yes.
One of the wine expert kits, like little 7% fruit and wine kind of things.
Yeah.
Like, I may have even done this kit like the summer or fall before we started the show. It's that old. But I found like a little half a case of some I think it's kiwi pear.
So wait a minute. Okay,
Yeah.
so wait a minute. So you started this with me. You and Mississippi and Aaron Martin. So we're talking what? Oh, going on almost 4 years now.
About 4 years. Yep.
So this is a well-aged fruit mead.
Yeah, and this is a
fruit
7%
wine.
that
Yeah, cool. Very nice.
It really didn't need much aging in the first place.
Wow.
It's doing a pretty good job of holding onto the flavors. It's light. It's kind of hitting the spot, actually.
Wow.
The pear is definitely more forward than the kiwi at this point, but I don't mind that. I'm not a huge fan of kiwi. This is something I made for my wife, and I guess a little part of this just got forgotten about moving around or trying to clean house or who knows what. But I decided to kill off one of these. And then in my other glass, JD, this might be one of yours. I'm looking at a bottle cap with some Sharpie on it, and it says, I think it says sour and then bon. I'm not sure what the second word is supposed to be, but I think if I remember right, this might have been in that big box that I took home from the Iron Beet you gave us, the case of various different meads and braggots.
Sour? There. I don't know if I did anything sour, but okay.
Either that or somebody else gave it to me, but yeah, it's a random. It tastes like a braggot. It's definitely got a little bit of a sourness to it, but not very pronounced.
What color was the bottle cap?
It was silver.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, well, it tastes like a braggot. It's got a grainy flavor to it. There's a little bit of sourness to it. It's almost kind of fruity. I don't know if that's like maybe a blackberry or raspberry that got put into a braggot. If that's jogging anything, but it's not really pronounced, and I feel like a lot of the hop character is probably faded out too, because it's got that kind of grainy sweetness to it at this point without a lot of balance in that regard. But it's still a pretty nice quaffable drink here.
Was it carbonated?
It is. I think it was when I poured it. It is not at the moment.
Okay. Oh, okay. Ryan, what's in your glass tonight?
Well, it's not a fridge clean out, but I am still working on the cellar clean out, and dug out a bottle. There's one of two left that I found down there of the award-winning Mele Kalikimaka.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And you guys remember this? This was a stout style braggot that I brewed with coconut. And it's 3 years old maybe now. I mean,
yeah, at least. It
won a gold medal. It won 1 gold medal, I think a couple of silvers and a bronze. I mean, it did pretty well for me.
Yeah.
And this is, I'm very pleased with the way it's held up. It's,
wow.
The coconut has faded almost completely, which happens, coconut, but it's developed into a really dark fruit notes. So you're getting, the raisins and prunes and, dried cherries and those really dark fruits are coming through in this, just like you'd find in a really good, like an imperial stout. And so I'm just very, very, very pleased with the way this one is held up. And it was kind of an experiment. Whenever I make a batch of something that I think is interesting or might have some aging ability, I set a handful of bottles aside, and I'll come back to them, in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and just taste them and see how they're doing. I've had a couple that didn't age so well, and it's just more of experimenting than anything, just to kind of see how your stuff does. But no, this one I was really, really pleased with, really happy with it, enjoying it. It's, you'd almost think you were drinking like a honey stout at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got a lot of the beer quality. There's a little bit of, you can find some of the honey in it, but just really developing like a nice kind of imperial stout that's had a little age on it. So, uh, yeah, happy find for Ryan tonight.
There, there you go. Well, that gives me, I've talked about wanting to do a dark grain braggot, something along a porter or a stout, and I've tried before, but could never get that honey character to come out. And so, I'm thinking maybe not letting it sit long enough, because I've let other meads sit, and the longer they sit, the more that honey character really comes through. Case in point, this traditional that I put together that's still aging with some now Hungarian oak. We did the American oak first. Now we put some Hungarian oak in, and the honey character wasn't real prevalent in the beginning, although it's a semi-sweet. Um, but now there's more of that honey aroma going on. You can almost get it on the palate, and just on the nose. You just take it on the nose, and then a small sip. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, this is a honey mead. This is, no question. So maybe the longer you let it sit, you know, you think that's a, you think that's maybe a key to using some of these dark grains. And dark grains can overpower. I mean, they're very strong tasting. You got the little roasty notes and everything. So it's kind of difficult to get a honey past that, I think, right?
Well, like we talked about, the harmonious blend or the
Mm-hmm.
happy marriage, or whatever you wanted to talk about it there,
Right.
of the malt and the honey, or the beer and the mead, is, it depends a lot. I mean, if you're making a kolsch, or a cream ale, or something very light, I mean, you might be able to go 70% malt and 30% honey, and go, wow, the honey is just really punching through in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, if you're going really heavy specialty grains, roasted and caramel malts and roasted malts, and all of those, you might have to go 60-40 honey, in favor of honey,
Right.
just to get any kind of honey flavor in there. So, that it really is going to depend on how intense and pronounced the flavors are of the malt that you're putting in there. But with that being said, you can do it. It shouldn't scare anybody. You should still want to do it and try it out. But more honey, absolutely. You're gonna think, oh, I'm gonna need more honey than in my my Pilsner braggot,
Mm-hmm.
which has a pretty light flavor. So that's what I'd say, JD. And then in terms of length of time, I don't know if I definitely wouldn't say indefinite, because I've had some that have sat too long, and more time doesn't always equal better. But the same thing, a little bit of age can definitely be good on that. And but at the same time, you can have dark beers just as ready as fast as anything else.
Yeah.
So anyway, just kind of sum up before I start spinning here, I would think about it a little more as the percentage of honey, or the intensity of the honey that you're putting into those to still get it.
Yeah.
I mean, you could you definitely, go over that 50% mark, 60, 70, 80%, if you needed uh, to start really getting that honey to balance out against some really powerful dark roasted caramel malts.
Yeah, gotcha. Fruit meads. We're not just talking. We're talking all fruit, right here, Jeff.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
100% all fruit mead. So take us off in that direction. And what are we talking about
Yeah, so I was browsing around the Mead subreddit, like I do, and just checked out their January monthly challenge that I found pretty interesting. Actually, this is one that I have not tackled. I've been kind of wishy washy as to whether or not I want to tackle it, but I thought this would be fun because I don't think we've covered this topic ourselves. I know we may have had a guest or two that talked about it, but this isn't something we've spent a lot of time with. The January challenge for the Mead Reddit is whole fruit meads, and they set out a few different requirements here. I'm just going to go through them real quick. You have to use at least 4 pounds per gallon or more of whole fruit, and that's total volume. So the example they give: 5 gallons in primary. You have to have at least 20 pounds of fruit. You have to use fruit entirely in primary. Ferment on the fruit. You can supplement beyond the whole fruit with juice. Minimum ABV is 10% for your final product. So the majority of the fermentables are not coming from the fruit. You can add spices, and you have to use honey, obviously.
Yeah. Any kind of honey.
The varietal is not specified. Clover or wildflower generic would be fine, I'm sure. With these kind of fruit bombs, I'm not sure a lot of that basic honey character would really come through anyway.
I would do, as somebody's digging around in a refrigerator back there.
Yeah, that's my wife getting some leftovers.
Yeah, we do record this from our home, so yeah, there's just some background stuff that we just gotta put up with sometimes. All fruit. Right off the top of my head, I think the one that probably everybody out there thinks about is blackberry.
Mm-hmm.
Not a. I like blackberry syrup on my pancakes, but I'm not a fan of blackberry flavored drinks. Just as an addition to augment or supplement, that's one thing. But an all blackberry, no, not a big fan. And I think mainly because unless you use frozen blackberries, I think it's difficult to get good, completely ripe, sweet blackberries like I remember picking off of my grandfather's farm back in Oregon and years ago, 100 years
Mm-hmm.
ago. So I'm thinking more along the lines of strawberry, peaches. I love oranges. I eat oranges by the bushel. I wouldn't mind doing something with oranges and vanilla. But what effect would the acid in the orange juice have, you know, on the fermentation? I wonder.
I would think that would be really hard to start with
Yeah.
the really high acid content of orange juice. When we're talking about whole fruit here, and this is some of the advice they go into a little bit later. Essentially, we're literally talking about using little to no water, and
Right.
we're using something like a pectic enzyme or a lalazyme or something along those lines to really break down the structure, the fiber, the cell walls, the thing that makes fruit and not mush, to separate juice from mush.
I'm an old cowboy from Colorado, and I love popping open a peach can and just digging them out like an old cowboy would right out of the can. So I would do peaches. I would get. The good thing about living here in Southern California is I'm not far from LA and the produce houses down in Los Angeles, and I can go down there. It's open to the public, and you can go down there and get fruit. Obviously you got to buy it by the case. So I would go down there and buy, maybe a couple of boxes of peaches. Now you can get really ripe stuff. I've gone down there several times and gotten. I usually bring back 100 pounds of tomatoes and make tomato sauce, or I used to, and I used to get the real ripe ones and plum tomatoes. So I would go. I would do peaches. Probably lots of pectic enzyme. Leave it sit for that 24 hours. I'd leave the skins on. Throw a couple of 3 or 4 cabinet tablets in there to try to cure that a little bit. The whatever yeast may be on the skins or whatever. On the other hand, it might be interesting just to throw them in and let them ferment.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and the idea of using a whole fruit or doing a whole fruit mead, it calls back something that I saw done when I was living in the Czech Republic, and it didn't occur to me that this is on the same level of something that I would be doing as a hobby, because this was 20 odd years ago. But when they make there's a local liquor called Slivovice, which is essentially it's made from plums. Mm-hmm. And what they do is literally they take the big blue, they're probably like 30-gallon drums.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I've seen them.
They take the lid off one of those, and then they just harvest plums. And they let them sit.
Yeah.
And they let nature take its course. And they kind of rot, and the juice squishes, especially with all the weight of more and more plums on top of the ones at the bottom.
Right.
You get more and more liquid out of that crud. The wild yeast kind of take over. They do their thing, and you end up with a kind of cruddy soup in a 30-gallon-ish barrel.
Yeah.
And then you take the barrel to the distill house. You distill it down to whatever you're going to cut it to, and you've got alcohol.
There you go.
It kind of reminds me of that, except we want a little bit more controlled result, and we're going to be adding a lot more sugar.
Yeah. I would do peaches. I'm a peachaholic. I love peaches.
Well, and I think peaches are really well suited to this, because they do have a really substantial water content, so it's not going to be as big a bear to do like 4 to 6 pounds per gallon of peaches, because you're going to end up with a substantial amount of juice from that.
Right.
If you try to do like 4 to 6 pounds per gallon of cranberries, you'd be in for a hell of a time.
Yeah.
I think, most berries are in that kind of halfway mark for me, but cranberries, like the last time I played with those, it took a massive amount of work just to get any kind of a juice or character out of them, and it was mostly just heating them and waiting for them to break down.
Yeah. Yeah, and I may be looking for something that's high in alcohol too, like a high ABV. So something along the lines of this port mead that I did. That might serve as a nice little after dinner aperitif or whatever. So peaches is my thing, Ryan. What's your what fruit would you choose?
Well, I could go and say, strawberries or black currants or, things like that. But there's 2 fruits that come to mind, which I think would play really well, especially when you talk about that you can add spice to this first one and things like that. And I'm thinking cucumbers. Cucumbers are
Is that a fruit?
They are a fruit. And I've had some really good cucumber meats. The first one I think I had was Carvin Wilson, his famous cucumber lime mead. And I think I've had cucumber and mint, and it goes really well. And they're mostly water as well. You could throw 20 pounds in there and no problem. right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking cucumbers. And the second one, this is something that I kind of wanted to try. I might try it. I don't know. If I do, it's going to be a small batch because, I keep experimenting to a reasonable,
Right.
reasonable volume these days. But the other fruit that I would think about trying, and yes, it is a fruit, are tomatoes.
Yes. Oh my God.
And
Yes.
and I think you throw 20 pounds of tomatoes in there, and your honey. And I know that sounds weird, but you're not going to end up with ketchup. Don't worry.
No. No.
Um,
No. No.
there
No.
are there are some country wine makers who make outstanding tomato wines. Some of these have the complexity of like Cabernet, and I think you could do a lot with the tomato, and be good. Now, maybe JD, at the place that he was talking about, can get some of these, but hold on to some of these ideas because in the summer you go to the farmers market,
Yeah.
and I've always told you my trick that look, if you're going to find the prettiest pear or the plumpest blueberry, whatever, get there at 5 a.m. Get there when they're unloading the trucks, and
Yeah.
take your pick. But if they close at 2 or 3 in the afternoon or whenever they close, and all you care about is getting a bushel, go then. Go
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Go when they're loading the trucks.
Yeah.
You either get there when they're loading the trucks, or unloading the trucks or loading the trucks. So now you get there when they're loading the trucks, and all of a sudden that $50 flat of whatever, $20 basket is maybe half or a quarter of that price, just because they don't want to bring it home again,
Right.
have it rot there. So go to your farmer's market, and buy 20, 30 pounds of cucumbers, or 30 pounds of tomatoes, and you don't care if they're bruised or whatever, because you're just gonna bruise them up, bruise them up anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
And do that. Those are two. And if you're trying to, like I said, you can do a strawberry, you can do black currant, whatever. You can do a blueberry or a peach, and there's no problem with that. But why not do something a little bit different than JD said? How many times do I have to have a raspberry mead?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Jeff, what, thinking about fruits that I wouldn't do, I already said blackberry. Uh, Not that I don't like blackberries, mind you. I'll make that clear. I love blackberries.
Mhm.
But I mean, blackberry juice, blackberry mead, blackberry this, it just doesn't do anything for me. So, what fruit would you not use in this kind of a mead?
Well, and I think there's a qualifier that we have to throw in here, whether or not we're doing a single fruit or whether or not we're blending. Because if we're doing single fruit, there is no way in hell I would do a blackberry or a raspberry or um, anything in that kind of family of really potent little fruits. Because man, you would end up with just tart, tannic little bombs dropping every time you took a sip of that.
Yeah.
It would be so hard to balance in the end, and I'm not even sure it'd be worth it. So yeah, I wouldn't do anything like that if I was doing a single fruit. Now, if I were blending, and we could do, some peaches with the blackberry, or some like apricot and cherry and a little raspberry. Yeah. If we can kind of blend to our heart's content here, and I don't see why we couldn't, then yeah, those I would allow something like that as a secondary note, because they're not going to be the bulk of my fruit, but they're powerful enough to really, stand out and add something different to this show.
Yeah. Yeah, there's another fruit that comes to mind, Ryan, and I don't know if I don't know if they even have them up there in Mead House North up there in Minnesota. Help me out here, Jeff, because it's not the dragon fruit. What the hell is it? It's that big old green ugly thing with the thorn. It looks like something out of. It looks like a
jackfruit.
jackfruit. Looks like a goddamn dinosaur egg. I mean, it's just this big, green, ugly, thorny thing. Ryan, I don't know if you've
Oh,
seen one of
I'm
those.
familiar. I'm familiar with the jackfruit.
Have you, and you've taken
I've
one
never,
apart?
I have not, but there are
Don't.
some vegans up here. There's a couple of like vegan restaurants and vegan butcher shops and stuff.
Yeah.
And I saw that one of them was advertising it as like a vegan barbecue.
Yeah.
I guess it's got this really interesting flavor that
It's
you
interesting.
can almost like mimic like a pulled pork or something.
Mm-hmm. I've actually had that. A vegan or I guess vegetarian friend of mine used some jackfruit and a bunch of spices to make a kind of the vegetarian pulled pork, and it texturally it was okay. It pretty much matched it. Flavor wise, pretty good. You could tell there was something off with it. Like it tasted like okay pulled pork, which it's not a bad thing, but it just wasn't the best pulled pork I've ever eaten.
What
you put enough Sweet Baby Ray's on there, you probably wouldn't know if it was oysters or straw under there.
Oh my God.
Well, if you get enough barbecue sauce on it, texture's the only thing that matters, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
What wouldn't you use, Ryan?
What wouldn't I use? I think though, a couple things I might not use. You talked about oranges. If I was doing oranges, my preferred way to use oranges is just using the orange zest.
Yeah.
Or the dried orange peel. I've done some of that. I did a mead with just dried orange peel, and that was it. And so I'd be careful about using the whole quote unquote whole fruit of the orange, or any of the citrus. Whether it's lemons or limes or orange or grapefruit, things like that.
Yeah.
Other than that, the other one I wouldn't use, because I've done this and it took quite a bit of blending to make it palatable, was Concord grapes.
Concord grapes.
And don't get me wrong, there's Concord grape wine out there.
Yeah.
Especially any of your
Manischewitz.
Yeah, I was gonna say any of your Jewish friends have probably had Concord grape wine.
Yeah.
But they drink it sweet.
Yes.
And it's made sweet. All of the Concord grape wines I've had are very sweet.
Like muscadine wine.
Right. And I don't like sweet wines, and so it was very difficult. Let's just say a dry Concord grape wine didn't present as well as I was hoping.
Finish off this segment, Jeff. I know there's got to be a fruit out there that you just detest and that you would not use in a mead.
The talk of jackfruit reminded me of something that actually this may be what you were talking about too. Another one that I find at the Asian market is durian.
Yes, and that's another. Oh my God, yes.
And I think that would be really interesting to use in a mead.
I think
maybe
that's
even
the
as a
one
whole
that
fruit
has...
mead. I'm pretty sure my wife would divorce me for it though, because if I'm not mistaken, that's one of those fruits like in Indonesia and things like that. It's literally illegal to eat that on public transit.
Yeah,
it makes people sick.
I think that's the one that I'm thinking of. I think that's the one that has the thorny. It looks like a freaking dinosaur egg. I mean, it's this
right.
green thing and it smells. Mm-hmm. I mean, it stinks. Oh my God. I had some friends from Indonesia who it's like a staple in their house. And I walked in one day and I thought, my God, what the hell died in here? and their mom, grandma, was right. digging into this frickin' thing and carving out all this stringy. Oh my God! Oh no! Yeah, you're right. That's I think that's the one that I'd been thinking of.
Yeah. That was from what I've been told. It's actually, if you get past the smell, the taste of the
It's
fruit is really really good.
it tastes
Um,
good, yeah. But my God, like you say,
it's
if you can get past
just a
this,
lot to get past that smell, apparently.
yes, yes. Uh,
Um, the other thing this brought up to me, and I don't know if this is cheating or not, but you guys go to Costco. Do you see like the big blended fruit bags, like the mixed berry,
oh
or
yeah,
I think
yeah.
they even have a tropical fruit one, like something like $10 or $12 to get 3 or 4 pounds of fruit.
Yes.
Um, what do you guys think about using something like that? I mean, it's a blend, um, so you can't say it's a single fruit, but on the other hand, it's all frozen, so it's probably
Well,
picked at
you
the
can
freshness.
buy, yeah, I mean, you can buy single fruit, packages.
This is
Uh,
true. Yeah, there's like the wild blueberries or something like that are always
yeah,
around.
yeah. The nice thing about the frozen fruit is that they are flash frozen, very ripe. Okay, I
Hmm.
mean, these are, I mean, there's no way that they would sit on a shelf. I mean, they're way past shelf life at this point. So the best way to preserve them and still keep them edible is flash freeze them. And so they're like the perfect ripeness. So yeah, I would do that. Absolutely. I mean, who says it? I mean, does it say in the Reddit deal that it has to be fresh fruit or?
Oh no, it
Yeah,
just says
okay,
whole fruit.
okay, whole fruit.
So
That's works.
I would think, yeah, using frozen fruit like that would be a step in the right direction too, because you're already the act of freezing and thawing is breaking down those cell walls for a start. So you're already kind of getting that process of turning fruit into mush and juice um, rolling in your favor
Yeah,
before you add anything pectic.
once in a while. I mean, I keep frozen peaches in little, in small. I got this little food saver deal, and I make up these little packages, just a handful of frozen peaches, and I freeze them. And once in a while, when I get the inkling, I'll get some half and half and these frozen peaches and thaw them out, put them in a bowl, sprinkle a little bit of sugar and maybe an eighth of a teaspoon of vanilla, and then pour the half and half over them and eat them just like that.
Mhm.
I've done the same thing with blackberries, frozen blackberries. Just take a handful and I put them in these little, I put the blackberries on a sheet tray, freeze them, and that way you can have individual blackberries. You can just pick up a handful like marbles and put them in another package and throw them in the freezer. I do that. And I mean, I learned that trick as a kid on the ranch up in Oregon with my grandfather. Bowls of blackberries with fresh cream. Oh my God, dude. Anyway, good stuff here. Whole fruit mead, something we haven't talked about in a long time here at the Mead House. See, we're not all about braggots, but there's nothing that says you can't create a braggot out of your whole fruit mead as well. So you can think of along all of our braggot makers out there. You can think along those lines as well. So as promised, we promised everybody here for a couple of weeks we'd do a double header on social. I was going to say social distance. I mean, you can get all that in the news. Social club.
I've had enough
Uh,
social distancing. Thank you.
so the social club, and we've got three questions that Ryan. I mean, you came up with some pretty good deals here. And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on these three questions because we got another bunch of questions we want to get to. But Ryan, the first question you put up was why mead? Why do you guys make mead? And why do you like it more than wine or beer or cider or whatever? I'll start off. Why do I make mead? It started as kind of a fluke. I had no idea what mead was, and I was reading. I don't know. I couldn't even tell you what I was reading, and it talked about this liquor called Mead, and it was made with honey. And I thought, what the hell is this stuff? And so, Google Mead, and up pops just, countless web pages with, all about mead making, and suddenly it's like, oh, you can do this at home. So that's how it was different. I mean, it wasn't beer, it wasn't wine, it wasn't cider, so it wasn't juice. It was something completely different. I thought, well, okay, this is a science project I can do at home. I'm retired, needing something to do. And so that's how I got started making mead. Do I like it more than beer or wine or cider? No. I like it as much as beer and wine and cider because I have my favorite beers, I have my favorite wines, my ciders, and of course my bourbon and tequila collection. So that's all about me, Jeff. Why did you get into making mead?
Oh man, for a very long time now, I've been working Renaissance fairs as a performer, and I was at a small one in Oklahoma. This was probably like 2006, 2007, and they had a merchant there that was selling meat that he was making at his farm.
Oh, wow.
I got to talking to him. I was like, this is really good. How do you even make mead? And it blew my mind how easy he made it sound, because like apparently this guy was literally just doing it in the garage. He had some like some of the metal like 55-gallon drums that he had lids off of, mixed everything up in there. He had a layer of mineral oil over the top to keep oxidization at bay.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't make this up if I tried. But he's like, yeah, no, you pretty much just, mix your stuff in there and stir everything up, and you add some nutrient, and it pretty much just takes care of itself.
Yeah.
He, from everything he told me, it could not have sounded easier. So I was like, okay, well, I like this. All these cute girls in bodices are like this too. So I should look into this. And I did. And, it was a little bit more complicated than he let on, but not by much. And I definitely enjoyed the process to the point where, this is something I kind of fell into really quickly.
Yeah. Any, do you like it more or less in beer, wine, or are you like me and just kind of like the whole thing?
I like it all across the board. I have not done a lot of wine prior to this year. I kind of stretched myself in that regard. But for the most part, if I want a beer, I can go to the liquor store and I can buy pretty much any kind of beer that I want.
Right.
The same way with wine. Cider, there's a little bit less variety to it, a little bit more like you have to know which liquor store carries this brand or that brand and which flavor in this or that brand. But, it's there too. Mead, I feel like the kind of mead that I like has really only shown up in a couple meaderies. Mm-hmm. Really recently, the more of the session stuff that really, smooth, easy drinking. And mead is still interesting because we're still trying to figure out like what all mead can be.
Right.
I don't know how many times I've said it before, but like there are so many different ways to make it, so many different ingredients we can throw in. I mean, just today, Ryan threw out using whole fruit cucumber and tomato. I don't know if that was because it's a terrible idea or because it's just a different idea, but that had never occurred to me. So, I mean, we're always pushing boundaries with this hobby, and that is part of the romance of it to me.
Yeah. Ryan, as soon as you said tomatoes, my mind immediately went back to my grandmother's tomato preserves. There was nothing better. But how did you get started making mead? And do you like it more or less or the same than beers and wines and whatnots? Or what's your thoughts on it?
Well, when I saw this question, I wanted to include it because I thought it was a good one. I mean, we could have spent probably a whole segment of the show just talking about this one.
Yeah.
So when I thought about this, I didn't really think of myself. I just kind of broke it down a little bit, methodically or categorically, and thought, okay, there's a few reasons why I think somebody would go into mead. Um, in no particular order. Number one might be gluten or other ingredient sensitivities. That kind of thing.
Sure.
And so, but at the same time, you could, ciders are gluten free, wines are gluten free. You can make a sorghum beer if you want, but meat is something else. So you got like gluten free option there. The second one would be, you just really like the taste. I mean, you enjoy the taste of mead over beer, over cider or wine or whatever else you're drinking, and that's just what you like. The next one would be that you want to make, this is along the lines of what Jeff was saying, you want to make something that's not easily available, readily available,
right?
Out there. So, and this is a big reason that I started making meads myself. Was I remember going to the liquor store, around 10, 20, well, let's see, more than 10, less than 20 years ago.
A long time ago, yeah.
Mead. Yeah. And there was like one mead. There was like Chaucer's mead.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that was it on the shelf.
Yep.
And so, trying to think of, hey, can I make this stuff? And then again, if I want an IPA, I can go to the liquor store and I can buy a pretty good IPA.
Yeah.
So, what can't you buy? You can do that. I guess the next reason, kind of coming off of that a little bit as well, would be if you can do it more economically, if you want to try to save money. So I say there's only a couple of ways to save money in making, beer and wine and stuff. And it's if you drink the expensive stuff. If you're drinking Keystone Light or Carlo Rossi, you're not going to save any money by making beer or wine.
Yeah.
It's going to be cheaper for you to go buy a jug of Carlo Rossi or, a 30 pack of Keystone Light. But if you drink like Chimay, really nice, good Belgian beer, or if you drink Heady Topper or something like that, you can save a lot of money by brewing those because the ingredients are going to cost you a lot less than the $100 per case for some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So, and same with the wines, right? Same with the meads. I mean, you might be able to, you can make some of these really, really expensive meads cheaper than you can do that. The last one that I'll say, and I've seen a lot of people talk about this, is that they want to, do something connected to history and
Right.
make something
like
that
family dynamics.
Okay,
Yeah.
Vikings or whatever. Well, keep in mind the first beer that archaeologists, unearthed, where beer was made was nearly 10,000 years ago. So
Right.
I mean, beer has been made for 10,000 years. I mean, that's longer than the pyramids have been around. I mean, a lot longer than the pyramids have been around.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're saying, oh, well, the first mead was found 12,000 years ago or something, the beer was found 10,000, I ain't buying it. I ain't buying the fact that you're going to say, you're drinking it because you want to be connected to his, the oldest fermented beverage, whatever, when again, archaeologists have found beer brewing sites that are 10,000 years old.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, 12,000 years. I'm talking 10,000 BC. So we're talking 12,000 years old here. So those are, the 3.5 or 4.5 reasons why I think somebody might get into it. Again, for me, it was a big part of it was I kind of liked. I mean, I did like it, and I couldn't find it, so I wanted to make something that I liked that I could couldn't just go to the liquor store and find right away. And then from there, I mean, I've done a lot of the other things. I've brewed stuff or made stuff that is really expensive, and I just wanted to have something that was comparable, but affordable. And I haven't had any gluten intolerant stuff, but I've got a couple of friends that have that, and don't mind sharing with them. And yeah, so that's the way I thought about the question anyway.
Good deal. I'm going to save the other two questions. We may possibly catch up with those on the next show, or if we get time at the end of this segment. I want to move into some of our listener questions before we scoot out of time here. Subject: tasting and oxidation. This is kind of a long one, Jeff. I am a newbie mead maker and haven't been able to find a suitable answer to this. I've done a mild amount of research and keep hearing about how bad oxidation is for mead. I haven't heard how headspace after fermentation is important to monitor. Potentially allowing oxidation to occur. As I listen to your podcast, many of you mention about how to taste your meads at different points during their aging process. I'm not just the aging process, all during fermentation too. You really want to stay on top of that, especially if you're using fruits and vegetables and whatnot, other flavorings. But I'm guessing that you are pulling a sample from a large carboy that is used for aging. So to do that, are you opening up the carboy, allowing outside air in? The gist here is he's worried about oxidation, guys, and cracking the bung off the top of the carboy, the airlock, allowing air to get in, and being worried about oxidation taking place. So, Jeff, is this a huge thing we should be worried about here? Or is this kind of a no-brainer? I kind of know where you're going to go with this, but you're the science guy.
Sure. So, the reason in general we don't worry about this is that blanket of CO2 at the top of your fermenter. And it's not just hanging out at the top of your fermenter because that's a nice place for it. It does that because CO2 by itself is heavier than the air. So let's say I'm going to take a sample with my wine thief. I've got one of those really narrow glass ones that I just stick in there. It's maybe 3/4 of an inch thick. And I'm going to put it in there enough to get like a quarter to a half an ounce of taste, not very much. Yeah. And so I'm displacing some of that CO2, yes, but that blanket of CO2 is still going to be the bottom. The CO2 is going to sink to the bottom, and any air that does get into the carboy after that, it's going to be at the top. The next time I go to take a taste, that air at the top is probably going to be the first thing that comes out before any more CO2 does. So yeah, no, there's a possibility that it mixes. I don't know how much we really need to worry about that in the grand scheme of things. I think the CO2 is going to keep a good seal on that, honestly. So beyond just, hey, be sure to sanitize your wine thief before you stick it in there, I've not really given a lot of thought to potential contaminants.
Yeah. Ryan, there are a few cases where oxidation can lead to some good things, right?
Well,
monitored
sure.
Oxidation. I mean, we're not talking about blatant, but
yeah, micro oxidation. I would probably go with there. So when you are, and this typically comes, say, from barrel aging or something like that, where there is tiny amounts of oxygen happening at over a prolonged period of time, bringing out really good flavors. This is where the sherry notes come in, or say a really good white wine over time will mature from, say, the fruit, notes to like a fresh bakery notes. And there's as that wine matures and micro-oxidizes and things like that. So it absolutely can be a positive thing, but it's not just as simple as, say, taking the bung off the carboy and putting a fan over the top to blow some air in there.
Yeah. I in playing around with my two port meads, only one of them, I replaced the bung with a little piece of cheesecloth and a rubber band over the top, and purposely let some oxygen in. And we're not talking months here. We're talking, maybe a couple of weeks or so, 3 or 4 weeks maybe. Then I put the bung back on. Did I notice a major taste difference? No. Uh, did it produce some kind of sherry notes? I mean, with the flavor, with the blackberries and the cherries and everything else that's going on, I couldn't tell you. To combat that, you do get a nice cognac flavor as well out of it. So could that be it? Probably not. I don't know. I have no idea. So I couldn't tell you whether leaving the bung off for 3 or 4 weeks actually helped or not. I mean, the mead still tastes good. It's still in storage, and I take a sip of it every now and again, and it just keeps getting better and better and better. But there is a coating of CO2 that I have squirted over the top of it, and with the airlock and everything. So I couldn't tell you whether leaving it off has produced any definite flavor changes or not. I really couldn't. I think that's something that if you're into that kind of thing, you'd really have to be careful and experiment with, to determine what kind of flavors, if you want to try to build that sherry characteristic, and how to accomplish that. Hey everyone, this is actually my first post, but I've God, I got to put my glasses on. My God, I can't even hardly see my computer screen anymore. Okay, this is actually my first post, but I've really enjoyed seeing everyone's recipes and general brewing adventures. I'm all set to bottle my first batch. It's been about 10 months, and she's been clear as a bell for a while now. I added potassium sorbate on this might be a Jeff question too. Potassium sorbate on a suggestion from a friend in order to make sure that fermentation didn't start back up in the bottle. Now it's super hazy. I was able to read a book. I was able to read a book through the mist. So he's talking about holding a page up on the other side of the carboy and being able to read it.
Right.
And then when he added the sorbate, now he can't see his hand through it. So is it kind of stuck like this now? I read the potassium sorbate may cause this. Any chance I can reverse it? Thanks in advance. Skull. I guess that's his name. Jeff, this is probably...
Skull is Norwegian or Swedish for cheers, essentially.
Okay.
So let's see. My first question is, how long ago did he add the sorbate? Any kind of stirring is going to kick up yeast sediment and stuff like that, and it'll get it cloudy and nasty. More likely than not, the thing you need to add to this meat at this point is patience, and just let that settle back down. It might take a few days, but it'll do it. If you're really having issues with it, there are any handful of good finding agents on the market. Obviously, I've talked a million times about Dual Fine, and I really like that one. Bentonite also really popular. We used to have sparklewood, but that's been taken off the market. So no, there's a handful of them that are really good at clearing, and yeah, there's no reason to be stuck with it after being so clear for so long. I would think it's going to clear on its own. Just maybe give it a week, but if it doesn't clear up in time, then I would try one of the fighting agents.
Yeah, Ryan, there's there's a school of, I mean, it used to be when you poured a liquor or a beer or a wine or whatever. I mean, you were looking at something that was just absolutely clear as, just like looking through a glass, and beer included. And anymore today, I mean, I run across beers all the time that are just hazy as all get outs. Are meads? I mean, is it that important? I mean, I get the whole presentation part. Maybe that's important to you. Maybe if you're entertaining. But like for those of us around the table here, we usually brew for ourselves, so I don't give a damn whether it's hazy or not, Ryan. How important is that to you?
It's not important in, well, I should go back. In terms of the beer world, I mean, it's been a couple of years now when all the cool kids are making hazy beers.
Yeah.
Hazy IPAs, hazy pale ales, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And hazy pastry fruit sours. And so, I wouldn't worry about the the haziness. If you were to do a blind taste test, I mean, blindfold yourself or something, or close your eyes and pour a hazy beer and a clear beer in front of you, and the same type of beer, I guess, like an IPA or something, and maybe do a bunch of them just so you can't pick out which they are, and have somebody, mess them up for you and drink them all and try to pick out which ones are hazy and which ones aren't.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to do it. Now, in certain competitions, that's a big deal. People don't want to lose any of the appearance points.
Yeah.
I mean, except Matt White, who throws edible glitter in his, and but anyway, so the point there is, let's say you're in a competition and you're worried about something like that. Just put haze in the description. Just say, hazy strawberry mead or something like that, and go from there. Because yeah, I mean, like I said, the easiest thing you could possibly do is get a bunch of go to the liquor store that has build your own six packs, and buy 3 IPAs or pale ales that look clear, and buy 3 that say hazy. Put them in 6 cups in front of you, blindfold yourself or close your eyes if you can trust yourself, and have a buddy or your wife or whomever, mix them all up and say, okay, taste these, and then you try to pick out which ones are hazy and which ones aren't. And if you can, come back to the Mead House, and
We'll put you to work.
And Jeff will mail you a bottle opener.
Good stuff. Good stuff there. All right. Put my glasses back on. Okay, so with all my previous batches, I added everything at the beginning and just did a single fermentation. My current batch is going to be 2, with the primary fruit addition after the initial fermentation settles right down. My question is, how do you measure for finished alcohol content? I'll be adding a fruit puree when the fermentation is more or less done, but would that boost my gravity right back up? So wouldn't that mean my final reading would be off, Ryan? Yeah, but probably not that much, right?
Make sure I understand that question here. It's I'm sorry. I think I got lost on there. Is the gravity reading off when he does what?
He's going to add. Usually, when he makes mead, he does everything up front, in a single fermentation.
I see.
So the current batch is doing a primary fruit addition after the initial fermentation settles down. I know that's kind of
Yeah, right. So he's not.
Right.
Yeah, I mean the about the only if it about the only thing you can do there, I think, is take a gravity reading of what where it's at prior to doing the addition, and then take it again after you do the addition, depending on what you're exactly adding. And you might be able to do some calculations to kind of figure out where you're going to be. Now, that's not terribly hard if you're doing something like adding 3 pounds of honey at high kreuzen in your braggot.
mm-hmm.
But if you're dropping, say you're going to make you're dropping a 5 pound bag of freeze and thawed a couple of times cherries in there, that's going to be a little bit different because that gravity's not going to change all at once. It's going to
Right.
take a little bit of time to come out there. So it can be tricky. I mean, you're going to have to do some calculations, and you're going to have to be okay with, horseshoes and hand grenades rather than, sniper precision on some of this kind of thing. But that's about where I'm at. I guess, Jeff might have a better opinion.
Yeah, so he mentions that he's adding a fruit puree, and I think that might be his saving grace as far as getting a good reading. As Ryan mentioned, the one kind of easy way to do this, and it may not be exact, it may not be precise, but it's pretty close. Take a gravity reading before, add your puree, and whatever change you note in the gravity reading, make that adjustment to your original gravity when you're doing your alcohol by volume calculation. You're probably going to get pretty close. The other alternative is that, since your fruit puree is fairly homogeneous, there's still probably some fiber and credit in there, but most of the sugars are going to be unlocked. Look up a distiller's calculator, and you should be able to take the gravity and ABV of your mead must in progress at the time, the gravity of your fruit puree, and be able to figure out what the adjusted gravity is based on that.
That's what I did with the two. I had the same issue with the two port meads that I did because you're starting out at it was 13 pounds of honey that went into this project. Okay, but the initial poundage was only like what was it, like 3 or 4 pounds of honey to start. But my starting gravity was way beyond the hydrometer. It was like 1.165 or above that because there were no more numbers left on the hydrometer at that point. So I knew it was really high. And so the honey addition for that 13 pounds came sporadically, okay? And in trying to encourage this high ABV yeast to keep producing and keep pumping away, okay? Because it's a very precarious thing. It took a lot of doing. It's a very intense project because the one thing that'll kill yeast is alcohol, of all things. Okay, here you are making alcohol, but if you want to kill yeast, more alcohol. Okay, so it's kind of a odd thing there, but so you're trying to prevent, this a high enough uh, uh, alcohol content to kill the yeast, yet you want to keep encouraging that yeast to keep eating the sugar. And so that's what I mean by a tenth. I had a little, I'll have to look for it, but I had talked to some folks and I put together a spreadsheet calculator to where I could take my hydrometer readings and just put the numbers in and would calculate what my reading were every time I added honey. So it get progressively higher and higher and higher in ABV. That's how I arrived at. I think the blackberry cherry one was 19.5%. What we came up with. The other one was just shy of 19. I mean, we'll call it 19, but it was like 18.8 or something like that, using the same yeast. So there are some things out there. There are some tools out there. It's math. I mean, if you're not good at math, get some help. But it can be done. You can work it out. It's not that difficult. I mean, hell, I did it.
The last thing I'll say on there is, depending on the fruit puree he's using, a lot of, especially if they're like brewers fruit purees, they'll have the gravity printed right on the side of the can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Doesn't Alexander's Jeff don't they print the gravity on the cans?
I believe so. If not like the exact gravity, they at least have a range. So yeah. I mean, you could cheat and use the lowest or the highest, whatever would be like, I guess, the failsafe for that particular application. And I think the widest range I've seen in some of those labels is like 0.008 points. So it's not a huge spread.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. All right. I see many beautiful dark melomels made here, almost looking full-bodied, near impossible to see through the glass, almost identical to that of regular red wine. I wonder how this can be achieved. I think this, let's see, no matter how much grapes I add, I don't know if that's a separate one or not. I think this is one question. I see many dark melomels made, well, I guess out there, looking full-bodied. I think he's talking about the richness of the color. You just can't see through the bottle or the glass. And wondering how that's achieved, Ryan. How do you get...
Well, I think a couple things here. He's talking. He says, "I see many beautiful dark melomels out there, looking full-bodied. And impossible to see through the glass. So, think of like a nice red wine or something."
The second part. Okay, hang on a minute.
But then he's saying, no matter.
Hang on a minute. Okay, I'm looking at this question again. I think there's this next paragraph is part of that question. No matter how much grapes I add, almost no additional water. How long do I leave for color extraction? The whole batch becomes clear, transparent after filtering. Obviously, when making such a style, would one skip fine filtering? So that's all one thing. So go ahead, continue on.
Right. So I was going to say a couple things. He's talking about grapes, and I don't know which grapes he's using here, but a lot of those big, dark, beautiful melomels that you see on, say, Facebook or Reddit or things like that are not necessarily piments. They're made using black currants or raspberries or blueberry. I mean, they're made using really, really dark fruits, yes. Cherries, things like that. And they're using a lot of them. So if you, yes, they are full-bodied, they are dark, they are that. I don't know if they're piments necessarily. So when you're saying how many is how much, and say how many grapes you're using, I'm sure you could achieve the same type of thing if you're using a ton of Cabernet grapes or Merlot grapes or Syrah grapes or something that's also really dark, and doing that. So this is how long I leave for color extractions. The whole batch becomes clear and transparent after filtering. I mean, even if you filter a really, it shouldn't make it transparent. So I don't know, not enough information on here, but I think the point is, you know, not all of those things are going to be piments, meaning grapes. They are
Yeah, and
using other fruits as well.
I'm not sure after rereading this, Jeff. I'm not sure if that's two separate questions or one.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah, I
remember
was
how
a
I
little.
copied it, but let's deal with the melomel, the first part of that. I mean, I have to agree with Ryan. When I did the two port meads that I did, okay, one is a blackberry cherry, the other one's a plum and black currant, and they're both very dark. I mean, you cannot see even if you just poured a half an inch into a glass, you can't see through it at all. So they're very dark. They're very clear, but they're very dark, and that comes from the fruit. Okay, that's the blackberries, obviously, in the one. With the wine, use the red wine concentrates, Zinfandel and Cabernet. Actually, in both of them, Petit Syrahs. And then the other one was the black currant. I mean, if you really want to darken up a mead, use black currants. That'll do it for you. So I get that whole part of that. Okay. Let's move into the second part. I don't know if it's from the same person or not, but no matter how much grapes he adds, almost no additional water. How long how long do I leave for color extractions? The whole batch becomes too clear, transparent after filtering, obviously. I'm not quite sure where that's going.
Right. And I've never heard of filtering, at least not on the level a homebrewer can achieve, being strong enough to strip out like color.
Yeah.
A lot of the color that we're talking about here is it's stuff like anthocyanins they're living primarily in the grape skin. When we're talking about grapes, you get a little bit more like free floating in the juice when we're talking about blackberries or things like that. But again, it's mostly a skin thing, which is why if you're making a blueberry mead, you're gonna get a darker blueberry color if you leave the skins kind of floating rather than just letting it sit for a couple days and then pulling all the skins and the pulp and stuff off.
Yeah. Yeah.
With regards to why you're not getting the color extraction you're looking for, it's a little tough to say. I mean, whether
that's length of time, the type of fruit, right?
there's also additives you could be using, like
Yeah.
you could be using the Lalazyme. I can't remember if it's Lalazyme V or Lalazyme EX. One of them is formulated for red wine grapes to aid in color extraction and break down the skins and the cells of the grapes more to help with that. And that might be helpful. May not be using enough pectic enzyme or whatever it is you're relying on to break down those grapes in the first place. So yeah, there's any number of different reasons that it might be acting up. It also could come down to using a few pounds of fruit in a what you're trying to make a piment, when realistically you should be doing something more like a whole fruit piment with grapes.
Yeah.
That could be the case too. Just not enough fruit, not enough skin to get the color you're looking for.
Yeah. We're getting down to the tail end of things here. I want to jump back up to one of the three questions that Ryan posed to us. Real
Judy,
quick.
now again, I didn't pose those. Those are social questions.
Gotcha. I thought these were Ryan questions. I thought this came from our listener Ryan in Minnesota. So these are actually listeners. Okay, cool.
Yeah, listener.
All right, number 3. Could I get a fermentation vessel with a spigot at the bottom and continuously top up the vessel with a honey water yeast solution to get sort of an endless fermentation going? I understand you really don't want to open a fermentation vessel until you're ready to rack the contents. But has anyone tried this? Is it possible? I don't know. I should have done my homework a little bit here. I should have gone back and looked for the episode very early. This is back when Mississippi Chris was still with us. So I'm going to say within the first 20 episodes of the Mead House, Mississippi talked exactly this topic. Okay, a perpetual, and there's a word out there that I still cannot find, guys. It's the same process in a refinery where they pump crude in and out pops your gasoline and all the different solvents, jet fuel, and all that. But I don't remember the name of the process. Anyway, it's a perpetual type fermentation. They do these at big breweries. So Ryan, can you? I know you have something not like this, but something similar, right? Where what's the name of that process you talked about before?
Uh, sure. So what I talked about was a Solera process.
Solera, yes.
Which is I've got a batch of mead, and then I take half of it out and then replace the missing volume with half of a fresh batch of mead, so that you've kind of over time you develop this. Let's say you did that once a year, so a year, you go for a year and then you pull half out and then you put in a fresh batch, to replace that. Then another year you pull half out and replace that with a fresh batch, and you develop this kind of perpetual process there. But down to this listener's question here, a couple of things. So when he says honey, water, yeast solution, I think he means inoculated must, so to speak. Okay, so let's talk about this. I use big mouth bubblers with spigots on the bottom, and I love them. I think they're really great. I've got essentially the vessel that you could on a home scale that you would talk that I think he's talking about. Okay, so now what does that mean? What does that look like? What does that do? You primary in that vessel, and then after primary you either go to the bottling bucket or a secondary, right? No problem on when you open the top of the big mouth bubbler and you're siphoning out the bottom, just so that you're not creating like a vacuum in there. And there's really no issue with doing that for 2 minutes to siphon off or move out of the vessel. So I wouldn't worry about opening the vessel because you are racking the contents. He even said you don't want to open the fermentation vessel until you're ready to rack the contents. So that's exactly what you're doing, is racking the contents. The next thing would be, the what he calls the honey, water, yeast solution, or as we're calling it, must, inoculated must. You wouldn't need to add more yeast. I mean, you might, but most often you wouldn't need to, because there'd be enough yeast in there to keep fermenting. I've fermented on top of yeast cakes before, no problem. Where you rack off one batch, you do that again. What it's going to come down to is space, because what's going to happen is your sediment layer, your trube, your lees, whatever you're making, is going to build up, and it's eventually going to get over that spigot. And so now, how are you going? Now you've got a problem, and you could use this auto siphon or something off the top, but what you're doing now is creating less and less and less space for your mead. So you could do this maybe for 2 or 3 batches, depending on what you're doing. If you're doing hydromels, you can do a couple more. If you're doing, big big heavy fruit bombs, maybe one, but the problem is you've got to have a way to get rid, if you want to truly perpetually, to get rid of that sediment. And on a homebrew level, you'd have to devise something or create something yourself, because I'm not sure of any equipment that just, off the rack has a way to do that. I mean, in theory, like JD said, there are professional breweries, professional meaderies even that have dabbled in this and done this. But on a homebrew scale, you'd have to get a little bit creative.
Yeah. Jeff, final thoughts on this last question here?
Yeah, and like Ryan said, there is a big problem with the yeast or the troop building up as you're doing this. The other thing that occurs to me is that when we're talking about reusing yeast, you get generally about possibly 5 batches, I'm told, before the possibility of mutation or off flavors and crud that makes you not want to reuse that yeast further kicks up. I would think if you're just going to be continuously feeding this yeast, you're not going to have downtime or ups and downs. You're just going to be accelerating the number of generations the yeast is able to produce, and therefore the possibility of weird or off flavors due to mutation in the yeast's genetic line there that you're making available to it. So yeah. I would worry about that for a perpetual thing too, where the yeast stops being the precise variety that's been grown in the laboratory and starts becoming kind of a localized, slightly different, evolved cousin to that yeast, and the results aren't quite what you want. That would be my other concern there.
Yeah, and I guess when you get right down to it, if you could just continuously reuse your yeast over and over and over and over and over, yeast would be 10 cents a pound. Okay. Mm-hmm. Ryan always sums it up best, when he talks about the cost of this whole thing. I mean, you go through all the painstaking, this of course more to do with salvaging yeast, washing yeast, and going through that whole process. I mean, it's not an intense process, but it takes some effort. But geez, why don't you just run down to the homebrew shop and just buy another package of yeast? It's not that expensive.
Right. If you're using a Lalvin EC19 D47, that's $1 for a 5-ounce pack. Yes. Sorry, 5-gram pack. 5-gram pack.
Yeah. So, saving yeast, reusing yeast, perpetual fermentations. I mean, if you're doing, 4,000 gallons at a time, every penny counts at that point, but come on, not at 5 gallons of whack, every couple of months or however often you brew. Geez, guys, we've come to that point in the show again. Man, how time flies when we're having some fun around here. Thanks for hanging out with us in this episode. 185 of them in the can. And don't forget, let us know what you're brewing out there. You can email us, info@themeadhouse.com, or just simply send us a message on that Facebook deal or Twitter, both of them, at the Mead House. And remember, one more show to go here next week, and we'll be out on 2 weeks hiatus, and we'll come back for another 6-week stint. So one more to go. In the meantime, hey, happy mead making out there. That's it for this episode. Ryan, flip the lights off. Jeff slammed the door shut and kicked the cat out. Hey, we'll be back next week with episode number 186 of the Mead House. Hey, gone.